Hi, Guadalupe and Victor. So happy that you can join us. We are talking today about their book, North American Borders in Comparative Perspective, Guadalupe Correa-Cabrera and Victor Konrad. I appreciate your time very much today. We are doing 5 questions with you. This is typically, we do these a little differently. So getting you on screen to talk about the book is lovely and very generous of you. We appreciate it. So the book that we're talking about focuses on all the borders of North America, which we don't, we often in the borderlands region obviously think of one border area. We're definitely in that mindset. Tell us what the goal is for you to publish this work about the northern and southern borders.
Yes, this project started with a conversation between Victor and me about the need to tell the public how the two borders, the U.S.-Mexico border and the Canada-U.S. border, are compared. To compare and contrast them in a very different time when we were thinking about integration. And so we organized in the year 2015 a conference with very important experts on border studies that are experts on the two borders, the Canada-U.S. border and the U.S.-Mexico border. This conference took place in Brownsville, Texas, at the university called the University of Texas, Rio Grande Valley, now University of Texas, then University of Texas at Brownsville, now University of Texas, Rio Grande Valley. And this project has evolved to analyze the two borders separately and compare and contrast their main dimensions and complexities and the way people separate.
Well, I can add to that as well. North America, as we well know, is very much America-centered, and there's a tendency to focus usually on the Mexico-U.S. border, because that's the border that's in the news more often. That's the border that is seen as more problematic. It's the border that concerns Americans to a greater extent. The Canada-U.S. border has traditionally been recognized, certainly during the 20th century, as the longest undefended border in the world. It was seen as a very, very positive border relationship, and one that didn't really concern the United States to a great extent. Those things have changed, particularly after the events of 9/11, and we're seeing them change at this very, very time in our history with the COVID-19 crisis. So the Canada-U.S. border is very real, and our objective in the book was to make sure that we provided a balanced approach, an approach that informed, educated, and advanced knowledge with regard to the complete border situation in North America. Not just one border, not just the other border, but the borders in comparative perspective.
And one of the main points that we also wanted to highlight were the inequalities between these two regions. To understand that we're talking about different spaces at that time, the concept of North America was very important. So that's what drove us to write, to compile and to invite some collaborators to write some pieces in conference of producing volume from those conversations.
The book is aimed at providing specific perspectives on each of the borders at the same time that it provides comparative perspectives on both borders. A number of the chapters deal with both borders, Some of the chapters deal more with one border or the other border, but all of that taken together gives us a much more comprehensive and comparable perspective on what's going on at North America's border.
Well, it's also just, I mean, taking in everything you've talked about, the fact that we're presenting other scholars and policy folks, especially, I imagine, a way to really look at an entire picture rather than us be locked into one area because of politics and other reasons. But that's one of the things I appreciate about the idea of the book. What makes it important for this ongoing borderlands conversation that we're always having around our neck of the woods?
Well, the borderlands conversation has become almost a border and borderlands obsession throughout the United States. We don't think occasionally about borders any longer. Thanks to the current administration in the United States, borders are front and center. They are always on everyone's mind, not only for people who live in the borderlands, but throughout all of North America. There are many people in parts of the United States today that never really considered borders at all because they lived in states far away from the borders that are now very concerned about what's happening at the borders and who's crossing those borders and why they're crossing and what purposes they have in coming into the United States. And so this has become a concern that is all pervasive, and it's also a very timely concern. Again, I draw attention to the pandemic crisis that we're engaged in currently, something that's going to change everyone's lives all across the continent, all around the world. And we suddenly realize that borders are much more present, much more changeable, much more dynamic than they ever were before. And that's not that borders have actually changed that much. It's that we, as humans, in our interaction with borders, are looking at them very, very differently, fearing them in some instances, certainly showing massive concern about what these borders are doing, both as barriers and also as conduits for moving things around. So this is a timely conversation.
This is a timely conversation also because when we started talking about this book, when we started talking about the two borders in North America, there was a conversation about North America as a region, as a region that was going to turn into more integrated with the example of the European Union. This is what we were talking about in the years 2014 and 2015 when Victor and me started to talk about this book. And then we realized that the conversation that we had during the conference had been changing. In 2016, there was a major shift in the paradigms and in the conversations regarding borders due to the presidential election in the United States. And I mean, this idea of North America as an integrated region changed to and we started talking about the wall as a central part of the conversation in the presidential election of the United States. And when the election took place, the wall was the thing that was recovered from that discussion during the campaign. So now we're talking about walls, barriers, limitations to migration, and we're talking about nation states again. The conversation has shifted, and with the COVID-19 pandemic, it's really more about borders. We just very recently, and this is something important about the book, about these partial closures of the borders and what is going to be the future, and we'll talk about that later. But this shift in the conversation, this dynamism, and in the discourse about borders is very important, and the book leads us to understand what has been going on in the past few years.
Wow. The news border discussions, we don't talk about the northern borders. We've been already discussing. Do you hope that the contributions in the book will help change those conversations? You have this wonderful group of contributors in the book that are part, that are part of this conversation as well. So I'm wondering how do you hope that we can these essays can change the conversation going on?
Well, I'm very practical as the Canada-U.S. specialist involved in borders for more than 40 years now, particularly the Canada-U.S. border. I've seen attitudes toward that border. I've seen views of that border, understandings of that border change. But one thing that doesn't change too much is that Americans lose sight of the Canada-U.S. border very, very quickly. There's a tendency to overlook the Canada-U.S. border. There's this sense of, well, they're just like us, so we don't really have a border up there. And no matter what happens, that seems to be a fallback position, a position which policy sort of tends to revert back to. But most recently, when President Trump renegotiated the NAFTA agreement, there was suddenly a tremendous interest in what was going on with Canada as well as with Mexico, because even though there was a clear effort made to divide the interests in the process of negotiating the new trade agreement, there was also a sense that the two things were part of something that had existed in the past, and that in reconstituting that trade agreement, you couldn't lose sight of the fact that North America did exist with two borders, and that both of those borders were extremely important. So we keep coming back to this. We keep seeing the Canada-U.S. border fade, and then it comes back again. But what's really important in all of this is that we need to understand that it's always there and that it's always going to come back. And it's important for Americans to be informed about the U.S.-Canada border at the same time that they're informed about the Mexico-U.S. border. And it's also important to realize that there are some aspects of this importance, of this significance, that are very comparable. And that's what the book is all about. The book is about comparing these borders and comparing the ways in which we evaluate these borders. And I think that's going to be one of the great contributions, even if I say so myself, I'm trying to be modest here, but it's one of the great contributions of the book is that we're putting it all together. It hasn't been done before.
Right.
No one has ever tried to publish a comprehensive book on a comparison of North American borders. It is alluded to. There are specialist books in environmental issues, let's say, or in trade that deal with both borders, but there's no comprehensive assessment of the borders themselves. And I think it's important that we do this, that we keep Canada in the conversation, that we understand how Mexico and Canada relate as well.
Mm-hmm.
It is a globalized world, even though you may not think it is. This, again, we come back to COVID-19, and we're seeing that all of the things that are happening around us are completely global. They're impacts that are being seen in all parts of the globe within a matter of months. And that's the kind of world that we live in now. We need to understand that. And we need to understand how North American borders work together and then how they fit within the context of a global situation.
We wanted to compare these unequal borders. I think the northern border of the United States is very important, and to compare it to the Mexico-U.S. border can put us in context. I would like to talk about the authors, the people who collaborated contributed to this volume. We are very lucky to belong to organizations, to the Association for Borderland Studies, to form part of different networks in the world. And we were able to select, and they are our friends, they are our peers who participated in this book. People who live, who know about the border, who have done very serious work in academia, as practitioners that have done work with journalists. And these are some of the best people that you can get talking about these places, because they know them, they have traveled, and they had lived there, and they are from these regions. And so that is a very valuable issue that we wanted to have some equilibrium, some to have people talking about the northern border and the southern border. We wanted to be equal and to open that conversation to the experts.
This book seems to me to be a wonderful guide for policymakers, students of policy, activists. How do you see this being a valuable tool for folks in policy as well as border activists?
This is a valuable book for everybody. It shows the two borders in different areas and in different dimensions. Some of the articles capture one part of one border, and other articles capture one same topic and compare them in the two borders. And this is, looking at this and the discussion that we have at the beginning and in the end, making sense of what's before and what is now and where we're going to move forward. This is important for students who want to know more about the borders, the inequalities in North America per se, and this is very important for policy analysts, and I will talk a little bit later about the activists. But with policy analysts, because they will understand the issues that were very well described there. What are the main issues? Immigration, energy, criminal activity, drug trafficking. We wanted to provide a comprehensive analysis of the two borders. And activism is also important to understand what are the main problems, who's left behind, what happened to the borderlanders, why not all the time borderlanders are taken into account when decisions are made. Decisions are made sometimes in Ottawa or in Washington, D.C. and Mexico City without taking into account the communities, the borderlanders, los fronterizos who live at the border. So we wanted to give that, and all of our contributors represent a part and have developed a part of that. Some of them are academics and activists. Some of them are practitioners. Some of them have understand very well the world of journalism, because the world that they do is based on the work of journalists. So this is a very comprehensive book on the two U.S. on the borders of North America.
Yes, you mentioned practitioners. I just want to develop a little bit more of that, Guadalupe. One of the things that we really wanted to do with this book is to inject practice into the volume, in addition to theory and academic discourse. This goes beyond an academic book, because we have actually engaged several practitioners as writers who have contributed substantially to every section of this book. And those papers, those chapters, usually come at the end of the section, and they give a practitioner's perspective on what is happening. So we're getting factual, truthful, and useful ways to deal with borders and the experiences of the practitioners in actually dealing with these borders. And that is an element of academic books that is being encouraged more and more by university presses like the University of Arizona Press, other publishers that both of us are used to working with. The funding agencies are very keen on that kind of thing because they want books to actually convey things that are practical and can be used by practitioners. And so that was a goal in our book. And I think we've accomplished that to a certain degree. You can always do better, but my sense is that we have made a good effort in that regard.
Geographical representation. Just to finish a comment on this section. Victor and me come from very different places in the region, and we have lived in very different borders. We've traveled, we understand how they look like, but we come from very different cultures, and we have had very different experiences in our lives. And so this coordination, this collaboration was very meaningful because that adds to the understanding of the inequalities, the complexities, and the diversity that we have in North America, and it will have exactly on North American borders.
I appreciate that. Our last question, I was going, we've kind of discussed all the questions as we've continued, but I wondered, for our last question, I was curious, as you brought the contributions together and began to edit the book, were there any surprises, since both of you, are experts in this area, looking at borders and your as well as your different border regions? Were there any surprises that you found in the contributions and looking at North American borders?
There were many surprises along the road, and there are many surprises that we expect, and we have been, discussing about that. We did that. We have done that between us, and we have been finding. I mean, this book was a little bit difficult because we had to revise it several times. As I said, we started talking about this book in 2014, and this book was published in 2020. So there have been 6 years where all these changes have taken place. And as I said, from integration to walls to borders, the rebordering of North America is a reality, and maybe more with COVID-19. I don't have a lot of hope about a world without borders, more integrated as we had before, because what we are living today in the COVID-19 pandemic and the crisis we're living maybe will leave us with a world with different processes, and the globalization and all these advances that we have been living in the past 2 decades, 3 decades. I mean, maybe we're going to have a different world order. We're going to possibly, we can pose a lot of hypotheses. I think that the surprises are going to come in the forthcoming years. And sometimes I see a world with more borders, more and more borders, because what we are observing right now, it's a path towards that. We were talking about globalization, open borders, and we might be talking about mercantilism, the nation states, nationalisms. We have been observing right now a resurgence of populism, nationalism, and that has been reinforced by the current phenomena that we are seeing.
One of the surprises, and it was a very pleasant surprise for me, was that we could provide in this book that has such a tremendous scope to it, the kind of detail and the kind of focused insight that we've been able to accomplish in this book. Just to give you one example of that, we decided to put toward the beginning of the book, right after the introduction, a set of maps. Now, I'm a geographer, so obviously I love maps. But I was amazed at how much detail we could manage to convey in a cartographic fashion about the facts, the locations, the actual impact of all of this border information, which could be conveyed very effectively right at the beginning of the book, so that people who are going to read the book and use the book will actually have a reference, a very handy reference right at the very beginning, which will help them to put into focus for themselves the kind of important detail that is associated with these borders. And so that was a pleasant surprise for me. I had some less pleasant surprises in terms of how much work was involved in dealing with all of this, of course, and the amount of attention we had to pay to be able to accomplish this thing effectively. But my sense is that our surprises have overwhelmingly been positive ones, and we hope that that sentiment is shared as well by the readers.
You know, I'm thinking, well, both of you are talking about it within, with your different points of view. I was thinking about, you know, how we've had to see many conferences rescheduled or canceled, and not knowing what's ahead in terms of folks coming back together again to have these meaningful conversations together. But I kind of got goosebumps at the time just thinking about how these current experiences relating to, you know, the border regions, how they're going to make for some pretty amazing conversations that y'all are going to be going to in the near future. And I look forward to hearing about those and the excitement I believe that folks will have, and just coming, as I said, coming together as academic and scholarly communities to further discuss what's going on, considering what we're dealing with right now, especially, you know. Thank you both so much. I really appreciate your time and your generosity and patience dealing with me. And I do appreciate you both so very much and taking the time to talk about the book.
Our pleasure. Thank you very much.
Please,
thank you very, very much.
Please take care of yourselves.
You too, Mary. I have I don't know if this is a moment. Maybe we can
Hold on for just a moment.